Rose Jane Luardo Salvano, a 21 years old, all the way from the cave capital of the Philippines, Mabinay. I am a third-year college student currently enrolled at Negros Oriental State University, Mabinay campus, taking up a Bachelor of Secondary Education major in Filipino. And by the way, this is my self-video presentation for task number 5 in ED 301, the teacher and the school curriculum. Do you want to know what are the comparison between the two countries, which is the Philippines and the Canada, when it comes of education? Last time, we talked about the comparison of the two countries using these following questions, such as the teacher qualification, the professional engagement and support for teacher. We look also at the sample of the faculty development program, and also we compare the organizational structure between the Philippines and the Canada basic education curriculum for secondary level. So today, let us start knowing the comparison between the Philippines and Canada of basic education curriculum of the secondary level. And this time, we focus on these four following questions. First, curriculum and curriculum making, curriculum process and development, curriculum program and of student and prospectus, planning and development with linkages and networking. So first, let us begin with the curriculum and the curriculum making. The Philippines has a national curriculum developed by the Department of Education. Schools in the Philippines are divided into kindergarten, elementary, secondary, and senior high school, as also implemented in Abu Dhabi, Philippines schools. Compulsory core subjects in both elementary and secondary schools include languages, mathematics, sciences, ICT, physical education, and the arts. However, in grades 7 and 8, technology and livelihood education, or what we call TLE, subjects are also introduced. In senior high schools, the choice of career track defines content of subjects. Typical tracks include academic, technical, vocational, livelihood, sports, and arts and designs. Students selected a specialization track based on their aptitude, interest, and school provision. And in the Canada, the curriculum is the content of schooling. It is that which is learned in the schooling environment. This is not limited simply to familiarized subjects like mathematics, science, or reading. The curriculum is significantly more far-reaching. It also prepares students to become future workers and citizens. And it is because of this socializing nature of the curriculum that it is a topic of enormous sociological interest. The curriculum is a social construction with many embedded and taken for granted assumptions about what knowledge should be transmitted to the young people. Who decides what goes into the curriculum? What assumptions about knowledge are ingrained in Canadian curricular practices? Because education is under provincial and territorial jurisdiction in Canada, each province and territory has its own Ministry of Education that has official curriculum guide for teachers to follow. There are official documents and the following of the curricular guides is mandatory for teachers. Curriculum guides tell teachers what should be taught in what order, and how much time to allocate to specific topics. The detail of the curricular document, however, varies greatly from the province to province. The method by which the teacher chooses to teach the topic in the entire up to them. Teachers learn about ways of teaching specific topics as part of their teacher's training, which also follows the curricular guidelines but at a post-secondary level. The modernization and curricular reforms in 1992 to 1920, Canada's population dramatically increased between 1892 and 1920 due to mass immigration. During this time, about 4 million new inhabitants arrived in Canada. The Yukon in the 1898, Alberta and Saskatchewan, both in 1905, also joined in confederation between these years, adding to Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, the Northwest Territories, British Columbia, Prince Edward Island, and Manitoba, which had joined earlier. Canada at this time was engaged in country building and Canadianization of the new emigrants, which continued to be an overarching curricular objective. Growth for Canadian schools at this time is also greatly attributable to laws instituted around compulsory attendance. But all provinces, except Quebec, had mandatory attendance laws by 1920. Increased enrollments and population growth meant to the massive expansion of the Canadian education system. In the early 19th, new education was introduced in English Canada, which incorporated less traditional topics of study in the classroom. Traditionally, the subjects covered in formal schooling focus mainly on English, which is the literature and the grammar. And the mathematics, learning Latin, and the rote, learning of historical dates and the geography. New education introduced the subject of economics, the domestic science, cultural studies, and physical educations to the curriculum, but not with uniform success. Kindergarten was also introduced as a new education reform. At this point in history, the major purpose of public education in English Canada was to assimilate the large numbers of new immigrants. The time to dominant Anglo-Saxon was values and to keep the Canadian curriculum free of American influence. In 1920 to post-Second World War, in the 1920s, new education and similar reform efforts continued to gain popularity as British educators, to influence by progressive movements in the United States, continue to argue that education should be more encompasses than just the 3 R's. Learning purely through memorization was also regarded as less acceptable to the possibilities of students engaging in experiential learning. The late 1930s and early 1940s saw the beginnings of the progressive education movement, which is the pedagogical approach that prioritizes experiential learning, like learning through doing and experiencing, over the massing and memorization of facts. Reforms of this era were characterized as being more child-centered, activity-based, integrating various subjects for example, the social studies emerged as a subject, which was the result of combining geography, civic education, and history. The content of this course offered across the grade levels was based upon the developing democratic and cooperative behavior through experiential learning. Alberta led all provinces in adopting major revisions to the curriculum in the late 1930s that promoted progressive education, with the provinces following in the 1940s. The mid-1960s is associated with another major shift in curriculum across Canada. In English Canada, much pressure was put on the educational system to change in order to respond the newer values and worldviews emerging at the time. In addition to less centralized control of schools and an increase in the regional specificities of courses of study, schools had to respond to demands from students, and also the members of the public who had various concerns. Students wanted more practical knowledge that also reflected a more diverse for the non-British population. Advocacy groups cropped up in the form of federal agencies, customer organization, organized labor, and human rights organization. These groups view classrooms as an ideal place to cultivate their desired social changes. Many rights movements also occurred in the 1960s. Aboriginal civil rights activism, as well as the civil rights movement in the United States. And the second wave of the feminism across Canada, the UK, and the United States drew attention to the racial and gender inequalities. During this period, advocacy groups representing Aboriginal and various minority groups moved to press multicultural, non-sexist, and non-racist treatments of subject matters. At the same time that pressures were being made to make the English-Canadian curriculum for progressive, the Quiet Revolution was occurring in Quebec. Up to this point, the schools in Quebec were run by the Catholic Church. In 1960s, Quebec completely overhauled its education system, replacing Catholic Church leadership with government administration. The reasons for this change were manifold, but at the core was the desire of the leaders in the French to Canada achieve a workforce that had the essential qualification to modernize Quebec both economically and culturally. In the 1970s, Quebec introduced controversial legislation that required new immigrant children, which included children from other Canadian provinces, to be educated in the French rather than English. These schools reforms were all considered essential by leaders who sought to overturn what they believed to be Francophone disadvantage resulting from the hundreds of years of marginalization under Church and British domination. Since the 1970s, additional shifts have occurred in curriculum across Canada. The 1980s was marked by an increase in centralization after the decentralization in the 1960s to create more accountability. Standardized testing was reintroduced after having previously been abandoned, and more focus was gained placed on skill performance in reading, writing, and mathematics. Teachers resisted these top-down demands and insisted on being included in these decisions around curriculum reform. The inclusion of teachers in curriculum reform became accepted practice in 1980s. In the 1990s to the present day, they were again characterized by large reform in several provinces that were in response to various factors, including the perceived poor performance of Canadian students in the international ranking, as well as high dropout rates. Inclusiveness was also emphasized in the reforms, with efforts to engage and represent a wider diversity of perspective. Curriculum accountability. Given the considerable amount of decision-making that goes into determining what should be included in the curriculum, it follows that provinces and school boards would want to ensure that teachers are following the curriculum and the students are learning its content. How do the provinces and school boards ensure that curriculum is being followed? In other words, what measures of accountability are built into the school system to ensure that the curriculum is being followed? One formal tool of accountability is standardized testing procedure. Another, the informal technique, is media pressure. Let's go to the second question, which is the curriculum process and the development. The curriculum development in the Philippines, curriculum development is defined as the process of selecting, organizing, executing, and evaluating learning experiences on the basis of needs, abilities, and interests of learners and the nature of the society or community. Curriculum development in the Philippines touch on the religion, economic, political, for mass education, and excellent in education, and social influences and events that took place in the country. The colonial rule of the country tailored the curriculum to serve colonial goals and objectives. The curriculum during the liberation period in 1945, steps were taken to improve the curriculum existing before the war. What are these? Restoration of grade 7, abolishment of double single session, and adoption of modern trends in education taken from United States. The curriculum during the Philippines Republic, the granting of independence to the Filipinos led to some educational reforms in the curriculum. Great experiments in the community school idea and the use of the vernacular in the first 2 grades of the primary school as a medium of instruction. An experiment that led to a change to the Philippine educational philosophy was that of school and community collaboration pioneered by Jose V. Aguilar. The community school concept had for its goals the improvement of pupils and community life through the curriculum. It is source of gratification also to note that the school are increasingly using instructional materials that are Philippine-oriented. The order of priority in the purchase of books for use in our schools as follows. There are books which are contributions of the Philippine literature, books in character or education and other library materials, books and charts on science which will enhance the current program of administration in science education. Library equipment and permanent features, the book locally published, book written by local authors, books and library materials published. The crucial of roots instructional materials in the promotion of the nationalism is now well recognized. According to the responsible educational leaders, we are in great need of instructional materials that will give emphasis on the following areas: the improvement of the home industry, the appreciation of the service of a great men and women of our country, and the preservation of our cultural heritage. In elementary level, vocational education has been introduced as a part of the educational program of the Bureau of Public Schools. Another step taken in the direction of increasing respectability for technical education was the establishment of vocational schools. The use of media like television, radio, film strips of our teaching helps a lot in the attainment of our instructional purposes and enrichment program. In Article 14, section of the 1935 Constitution of the Philippines, which defined the aims of education in the country, emphasized that the important role that curriculum plays in transmitting the values of society to succeeding generation. The secondary school curriculum was revised to make it attuned and more responsive to felt needs of our times. It is both work and value oriented. It is single track curriculum which focuses neither on college preparation nor on vocational skills development alone, and further aims to equip the students with the knowledge of insights and appreciation of the ongoing community life and problems. In the collegiate level, steps are also being taken to make the curriculum respond to the needs of the times. Let's go to the next question. The third question. The course program and the statement of the student and prospectus. Since the 1940s, the Philippines has followed a 10-year system of school education consisting of 6 years of primary school and 4 years of secondary school. The following completion students were awarded a high school diploma which would grant access to the university. In 2012, the K-12 reform changed compulsory basic education to include the kindergarten, 6 years of primary school, and 6 years of secondary school. The expanded secondary school is subdivided into 4 years of junior high school and 2 years of senior high school. In 2016, senior high school was implemented nationwide. Upon successful completion of senior high school, students receive a senior high school diploma or the katibayan. The completion of senior high school gives access to a university study. Higher education in the Philippines has been heavily influenced by the American system and typically follows a 3-tier degree structure: bachelor's, master's, and doctoral level studies. Although an associate degree may be awarded as a first degree, certificate and diploma programs are also offered at the both undergraduate and the graduate levels. Focus on the education course program in the Philippines, and then I will select one. Courses are intended to be taken by those wishing to further their personal development. Whether you take the courses in the classroom or online, there are a variety of specialized study areas. Earning an advanced degree like a Master of Arts may advance toward career or help someone move in a new professional direction. These programs vary in length, but most take 2 to 3 years to complete with a part-time or full-time course schedules. There are schools of education curriculum prospectus. The Bachelor of Secondary Education, major in English curriculum, Bachelor of Elementary Education curriculum, Bachelor of Early Childhood Education curriculum, Bachelor of Secondary Education, major in Social Study curriculum, Bachelors of Secondary Education, major in Science curriculum, Bachelor of Secondary Education, major in Mathematics curriculum, Bachelor of Secondary Education, major in Filipino curriculum. So these are the example of the prospectus of the Bachelor of Secondary Education, major in English. So now let's move on to the last question, which is the planning and development with linkages and networking. The teaching profession linkages and networking with organizations. Here are some quotes that I want to share. We cannot live for ourselves alone. Ourselves are connected by 1,000 invisible threads, and along these sympathetic fibers, our actions run as causes to us a result. The context of globalization, the university is geared towards the internalization of its program by establishing, coordinating, and managing linkages and partnership locally and internationally. These linkages, partnership, and networks with governments, non-governments, institutions, college, and universities aim to advance academic excellence, research, and extension engagements of the university. The Office of the External Linkages and Partnership works with the Office of the International Programs and the Alumni Relations in coordination with the existing units of the university by establishing, managing, and sustaining collaboration on areas of mutual interest using the principle of reciprocity. These are formalized through the signing of Memorandum of Understanding or the MOU, the Memorandum of Agreements or the MOA, and or Letters of Agreements or the LOA on the several undertakings such as faculty, students, mobility for research, lectures and discussions, joint conferences, research engagements and programs, exchange of academic materials, publications, and capability building activities. The school can enjoy linkages and networking activities with international, national, and local organizations in the community for mutual benefits and assistance needed. Linkages and networking are different in the degree of commitment by the partners. In linkage, the relationship between partner organization is quite loose, while in networking, it is much stronger, usually because the group and agencies have common objectives and beneficiaries. Networking is basically extending the outreach of the resources in different ways so so as to increase the effectiveness of the program. The linkages intends to serve members of both sides according to their respective needs, interests, and objectives, create bonds together to solicit support and assistance for purposeful activities. That's all for today's video presentation. Again, this is Rose Jane Luardo Salvano. See you for the next presentation.